Welcome to the Hideout. What should you upgrade and potentially even SP in Gundam Generation Eternal? This is PhiphyL's objective SP tier list. Essentially, it answers the question of what should you use your SP chips on for Gundam units. And it's super useful. You've got a bunch of filters in the top left, along with tag filters and eternal road filters. And you can use all these filters to filter out different Gundams and see what Gundams rank high for SP chip usage. So for my team, I'm using Unstoppable as a tag. And here it shows me every Gundam in the game that can be acquired from gachas, events, and dev units. Basically, what he's done is compiled an objective score for every single Gundam in the game and given them a total score. And he's also got some recommendations on what pilots to use with them, SSRs and also SP'd SRs, also Rs occasionally. This objective list gives you a look at a Gundam's stats, its movement, its tags, whether or not it has shield, its strongest weapons, its max weapon range, and it takes all those things into account and basically gives it a simple score. And this can give you as the player a reference to what you should or should not potentially use SP chips on for your squads. Now, a couple things to consider is that just because a Gundam's in S tier or A plus tier or A tier, you may or may not want to SP those Gundams depending on what they are and what your team composition is. So, for example, in my team composition, I've got the Phoenix Gundam as a supporter, and the Phoenix Gundam UR support helps with physical attacks. So it does tend to help with melee-oriented squads with its support attack. So I might want to still prioritize melee Gundams in my Unstoppable team rather than super long-ranged Gundams. Now, you'll notice that the Gundam Astray Gold is actually in the A plus tier. And the main reason for that is it has a bunch of tags, so it gets 3 points for that. It has a map weapon, so it gets a point for that. Has good movement, has high attack, and, good weapon damage, high weapon attack. So the Gundam Astray Gold, and despite it being a melee Gundam, it does have a max weapon range of 4, which is probably the highest melee range available, if I had to guess. I'm not 100% sure on that, but that's a pretty good range on a melee range Gundam. So if I were looking to upgrade my team, again, I can come to this website, filter by tag Unstoppable. I'm going to filter out gacha units because they're a little bit harder to predict. You can use gacha units. It's just that it's good to have a gacha unit that has 1 or 2 stars. That way you can use an SSR limit break for it to get it to a 3-star limit break. So I'm going to be looking at event and dev units mainly because a lot of the event units you can get right now, you can farm with the fierce assault event, and you can also get more with the history stages that they just added. I'm also going to unfilter normal units and R units. You can look at SR units. Some SR units are actually good for SPing. Gundam Kyrios, Unicorn Gundam, Gundam Ariel, and the Justice Gundam, they are options. And I'm actually going to talk about the Gundam Ariel a little bit later. And I think they all kind of fit in the same category as well, but I'll use the Gundam Ariel as an example. But I'm going to unfilter the SR units for now just to kind of clean up the table. And I'm also going to look at only attackers because I have a UR defender and I have a UR supporter. So I'm not super worried about those roles in the team. And by doing this, I've effectively, collapsed the list down to a couple of Gundams. And I can look at them all and I can say, okay, G-Quux is a B+. And the only other dev unit that I could actually look at using is the Neo Xeon, which I want to say is Char's Counterattack. And this is a late game or a later stage mobile suit. I haven't even touched Char's Counterattack yet, but one of the issues with this is that it is a large machine, so it only has space compatibility. But this is definitely something that you could consider. So I'm going to go back to the event units because the Gundam Astray Gold is a good example of an SP target for me. There's really not a whole lot of S tier caliber Gundams with the unstoppable tag. So A plus tier Gundams are not a bad option for me. And as I said with the Neo Zeong, it's really the only other thing that I can develop right now if I went and did Char's Counterattack, which I may or may not even be able to get through it with my carry squad at this point without SPing some Gundams. So the Gundam Astray Gold Frame Amatsu is definitely a good option for me to SP at this point because I'm getting to the point where I need to think about ways to upgrade my squad, and I don't have that many upgrade paths left because everything's max level and max limit break, and my pilots are pretty high level. Now, another thing that you could do is you could look at stages that you're having trouble doing for SR units and specifically dev units that line up with stages that you're currently having trouble doing. For example, I'm currently having trouble getting through the end of the Witch from Mercury series. And the Gundam Aerial, the SR version, not the rebuild, but the Gundam Aerial is considered an A tier on his list. So it's got a decent amount of abilities. It doesn't have any negative points. Decent HP, 5 movement, moderately good weapon range, decent weapon. So this scores an 8 point. So I could possibly be thinking about building up a Gundam Aerial, SPing it, and using it in the Witch from Mercury series as a series stage unit, and then transitioning it over to my Unstoppable team once it's maxed out to potentially replace the G-Quux. So these are kind of the things you're going to want to consider is, whether or not you can maybe get away with SPing an SR unit. And I'd maybe argue that if you are going to consider SP an SR unit, you might want to do maybe an A tier or better. It does say here in the top in the warnings that a unit ranked B and under would probably be a waste. So basically anything that's not a B plus, you probably don't want to SP. But that also means that A tier Gundams you could probably use for a decent amount of time and in a good bit of stages. And another thing you're going to want to consider is by using both of these filter by tag and expert road stage, you are going to be building your team for that expert road stage regardless, right? So, like building a Wish from Mercury series team, just in general, like you've only got so many attackers that you can use for a team or teams for this Eternal Road stages. So, I think there's a fair argument to be made for SPing the Gundam Aerial just because, like, there's only so many attackers that I'd be able to use for the Witch from Mercury series that probably isn't, like, gacha units. And, so without gacha units, there's 4 attackers that I can possibly use that are above B tier for Witch from Mercury series. And yeah, none of the N's or R's are worth using. So something like the Gundam Aerial is definitely something to consider, mainly because it does have the unstoppable tag and it does fit into my free squad composition. So I could transition into using it. And then it also has the Witch from Mercury tag, or series that's from the Witch from Mercury series. So it can be used as a more versatile unit for Witch from Mercury based things. Another one is Seed Destiny. Seed Destiny's a bit tricky for. Oh, another thing I should mention is that right now with the New Year's event, you do get one free SP conversion for a Witch from Mercury series unit and one from Seed Destiny. So, Seed Destiny, I'm pretty sure the best Gundam option is the Freedom Gundam. It is an SR. It's really good. It's got a 6,000 power weapon and it's got a really good map attack with 3 ammo. The Freedom Gundam is just an obvious standout for SPing an SR. So the Freedom Gundam and the Gundam Aerial are two units that I could think about definitely SPing. The other thing to consider is that the SSR units are just gonna be stronger in general than any of the SRs. So SPing an SR unit in a sense kind of holds value, especially if the SP on the SR is valuable and you can use it. Because just having a triple limit broken SSR that has upgraded weapons and a good modification, that can be used in a lot of stages by itself for series squads and the normal difficulty Eternal Road stages and maybe even the hard Eternal Road stages. Whereas a fully upgraded SR unit that doesn't have SP is going to struggle, generally speaking, in some of those harder stages. So there is an argument to upgrade the SRs rather than the SSRs just to add to the versatility of your units that you have at hand. And then if you just want to look at the best units possible, you can. And let's actually just look at dev units, because event units you may or may not be able to get. So you can just look at the best units available to SP and also just use this as a reference to what are good Gundams and good units. Because essentially this grading scale, this isn't SSPing. This grading scale has nothing to do with SSPing. That's an entirely different discussion. And all the SP grades are essentially given on the stats of the base Gundam, because SPing essentially is just a stat boost. It doesn't add any unique effects or attacks or anything like that. It's just adding to the stats of the Gundam. So everything is reviewable and is compiled into this tier list from PhiphyL for that reason. SSPing is a bit more nuanced because different units gain different abilities, and it's a little bit harder to determine what the best thing is to SSP and what isn't. And I think there's an argument to be made that most things in the game can be done with the URs that you get, the triple SSRs that are upgraded that you get, good formations, and SPing rather than SSPing. And you could argue that it's better to just use your SSP on something that you like or want to use rather than something that's meta in a sense, because almost anything that you SSP gets a good boost. Like units that have 4 movement get 5 movement. Every single unit gets an EX attack that's better than basically any attack that a single Gundam on this list has as a single target attack usually. Other units get more versatile movement. Some units get better abilities. So, but everything with SSPs are getting upgraded. Basically anything that you SSP is going to be pretty good. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks PhiphyL for the tier list. And if you enjoyed, please like, comment, and subscribe.